Hi guys, hope you're doing well. This video is going to be a prophecy update. Right now it's 5/16, so May 16th, and this prophecy is going to just be, basically an overview of a lot of things I'm noticing. So I thought it'd be important to kind of give this out there. I'm trying to do one at least once a month. We'll see, as events are occurring, but if nothing's happening, obviously there's no point in doing it. Don't do it to do it. But there's definitely things happening afoot, and important things. And as I think we're drawing closer to it, which I think we are, I'm definitely, I think, pre-tribulation rapture could occur at any time. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not saying this just to be some one of those guys who, well, hey, you got to listen to every word I say or something like that. No, the reality is pre-tribulation rapture could occur at any time. There's so many things that are happening, and that's what I want to get into here. Um, I'm just going to give a quick overview of some things, but the reality of it, what we should be looking for, and then what we are seeing happening, and how does that, come together, mesh together, to show us where we're at prophetically as Christians, which is very important because Christ told us and commanded us to be looking and be ready, which is telling us to be looking at the signs and so that we're ready and be about His work. That's part of that readiness. It isn't just sitting there going, "Okay, I'm ready, Lord, come get us." Escapism. That's what I'm talking about. When Christ is talking about be looking, be ready, it's like be about the Father's work, being engaged in the culture, being engaged in what we're doing, sharing the gospel, being His ambassadors, being the ministers, being what it is that He's called us to be as disciples, discipling others, helping others, doing about the works, and trusting and believing for Christ to come back for us, and seeing the events taking place is a key element that we, as a warning to the world, we're called to be that. We're the watchmen on the wall. We're the guys with the bugles. We're the guys who should be saying, "Look, the hour's short, the day is near. You need to be ready because going into tribulation is not where you want to be." Majority of mankind is going to be killed during that point in time. Depending on how you read those prophecies, I mean, you're talking about anywhere from 2/3 all the way up to roughly 11/12 of thereabout somewhere 5/6, however you want to word that, of mankind is going to be killed. So a huge number of people are going to be killed, and very few people are going to be remaining. Maybe 1/3 at best, or 1/6, depending on how you look at it. You read those prophecies and how they overlap. But anyway, it's going to be a horrible time to be alive, and so you don't want anybody to go into that, and certainly if you don't have to. And as someone who believes certainly in a pre-tribulation rapture, I think it's extremely biblical. You don't have to. Christ promises that we won't be part of God's judgment and time of testing, that He would save us from that time, not through it, but from it. Revelation 3:10. It also gets into that in First Thessalonians chapter 5. I think verse 18. So anyway, you can kind of go and look at those things to see where God says, "Hey, I'm going to keep you from this time of testing and destruction that's going to come upon the world." And that's what we're preaching. This isn't to just making people scared. So yeah, remember that. So anyway, what am I seeing? So one of the things I want to jump onto was key points that we as Christians should be looking at. And with all these things happening, it's just really amazing how fast things are going. I think all of it kind of will play a role into it, and it is playing a role. Number one, Israel. Israel's back in His land. Without Israel being back in His land, really wouldn't make any sense. So Israel is back in His land. They have control over the Temple Mount. They have control of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is now the center focus. And notice that this last battle and uprising and all this stuff kind of centered around the Temple Mount. Have you noticed that? Who is to say that Jerusalem would be a city anymore? There's lots of cities have fallen, by the wayside, but Jerusalem is a city. Who would say that the Temple Mount would be, even important at all, that there would even be such thing as Jewish worship anymore to have a temple? We do. All of that, again, falls back in line with in the last days. The Jewish people come back 1947. They just recapture Jerusalem 67. Now look what's going on. You have the priesthood being trained. You have active movement to rebuild the temple, raising of the cattle, the red heifer and stuff. Simply look up Temple Mount Institute. They're doing all those things. Those are Jews doing those things on a daily basis, preparing for the rebuilding of the temple, exactly like the Bible says. There will be a rebuilt temple. There will be a sacrifice system, which ultimately the Antichrist will go into, that causes the abomination of desolations, declaring himself to be God. Which again, some people are against the rebuilding temple, but actually Jews, who obviously aren't Christians, are commanded to have a temple. And the fact that they go into and proclaim this, he goes in and causes this desolation, tells you that it had to be something that God wanted for there to be something, an act of abomination of desolation to take place. So I would just put that out there. Remember that it's important for them to do it because they're commanded to do it if they're not Christians. Once you become a Christian, that's different. But if they're Jews, then obviously still following that law, they should build a temple, you know? So it isn't like we're encouraging it, but at the same time, we shouldn't discourage it. Otherwise, you see yourself standing against what God's plans is, or are, you know? But when we see, that's one thing. You see the rebuilding of the temple. You see the establishment of priestly order, you know, the Kohanim that they're training right now. They're sacrificing every Passover. They're doing, videos on, they're reconstituting the artifacts and the stuff that they need to have temple worship, the garments, the emblems, the menorahs, the showbread tables, all that stuff. You know, they're reconstituted all those things for the establishment of the temple. And the only thing missing, obviously, is the Ark of the Covenant, which who knows, maybe they got it, we don't know. But the Ark of the Covenant is really the only thing missing there in that sense. But you imagine if that was announced, that they found it. I mean, there'd be a massive movement of Jews wanting to rebuild the temple, I think. That could be down the road, near, maybe real soon. What else? Then you have, you know, this global pandemic, which is causing governments to spend money like crazy, weakening the financial systems that we would expect to see. If there's going to be a movement towards the Antichrist kingdom that's coming, we should be able to see what? Ultimately, we're going to see a 10-nation, 10 confederation, 10 leader, this type of organization that's going to rise. I don't know if either it's nations, states, or whatever it is, or regional leaders, or whatever it's going to be, but we should be looking for 10 of them. And that means that America, as the predominant Gentile empire in the world, is going to have to devise, change, transform, so that this beast empire that comes up that will only reign for 1 short hour, it says, and gives its power to the Antichrist, who comes on the scene, and ultimately halfway through the tribulation will go into this rebuilt temple, declare himself to be God, which means, and put us into sacrifice, which means there has to be sacrifice, there has to be a rebuilt temple, Jews have to be back in the land, has to be have control of the Temple Mount. You know, it has to be the nations that are opposed to these events because this war that takes place. And then Jerusalem is a burdensome stone that the nations are trying to solve the problem, which means there has to be a problem. You know, all these things are happening. And then you have them talk of the restoration of Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria. You know, you have the restoration of Jerusalem. America under Trump, you know, announced the acknowledgement of the sovereignty control of the Jews over Jerusalem. That's the restoration of Jerusalem, I believe. Next will be Judea. They started talking about that, and suddenly everything kind of broke loose, including COVID. I honestly have always said that Satan doesn't want the end times. He knows what's going to happen. He understands Scripture just like we do, and he realizes as that happens, his hour is shortened. That's why he's filled with wrath when he's thrown down. He realizes he's relegated to the earth, and that he can't leave. He can't go into interdimensionality that he probably does now, and so forth. He's relegated to the earth. And he's filled with rage, he says, because he knows his hour is short. I think Satan is doing everything he can to not cause the end times. Some people think he wants the end times to come. No, I don't think he does at all. Nobody's rushing to go get locked up for 1,000 years in the darkness and outer darkness. Nobody, and then ultimately after that to go and be thrown into a lake of fire where he'll be punished for eternity. Nobody's right mind wants that. I think he wants to prolong this long and as far as he can, and that's why I think this whole COVID thing happened. Because when they noticed that, if you go back and look, they were talking about the restoration or the annexation of Judea, exactly what Joel 3 prophecy says. Joel 3, 1 and 2. I did a video on that. You can check it out. But that Joel 3 prophecy is another one that we should be looking for. The establishment, annexation of Judea and Samaria, the recognition of Jews' sovereign authority over that, while they divide the land also. And notice that's what they were talking about doing, taking some of that land and giving it to the so-called Palestinians, along with Gaza, dividing the land of Judea and Samaria and giving East Jerusalem. Exactly what the part that's talked about by Joel, when I restore the fortunes of Judea and Jerusalem and Judea. And notice that he goes on, he says, you divide the land, blah, blah, blah. It's exactly what they were talking about doing. And suddenly COVID happened, and the craziness around Trump was involved, and and all that stuff. It kind of put a squash on that. The whole Abraham Accords, peace agreements. That takes us to that. That was what happened. So suddenly they stopped talking about that, and the whole annexation. Trump was out of office. No more talk about the annexation of it. Exactly why I think Satan wants to kick that can as far down the road as he wants. Some people always say it's like, well, God's kicking the can. God has a sovereign time frame. He knows when things are going to happen, and it's going to happen. Satan knows that too. He realizes that God's in control. He's the sovereign authority. He's going to establish events that will happen as he's predestined them to happen at his timing. But Satan certainly wants to kick that can down the road. He's not trying to hurry it up. I always say that Satan definitely does not want the tribulation to happen, because he realizes he's only going to have sovereign authority, complete sovereign authority, for 3.5 years. He's going to have authority for 7 years, but sovereign, complete authority for 3.5 years through his man, the Antichrist, that comes on the scene. So anyway, do we see those things happening? Yes. What other things are we seeing that's taking place all at the same time? Trying to do this as fast as I can for you, but so we're seeing the rise of this, this event taking place with COVID. We see, the craziness that happened there, and suddenly the transformations, and then nations are spending money like crazy. Well, these nations are spending money like crazy, which is undermining your economy. So we should see that this should lead to some kind of transformation, to where we're going to see this 10-nation confederation that's going to happen, like I was just talking about, this beast empire that has to come up first. But with that, it's going to also come an economic system. And this economic system means that you're going to have a transformation away from the dollar. So the dollar must demise, and you're going to see a movement towards this new beast empire economic system about a global market system. Revelation 13. We should expect to see a movement away from the dollar, away from its hegemony over the economic systems as the, basically the global currency, as it were. And we're going to see a move towards some kind of digital global marking system, at least the foundations of that being laid towards a global currency economic system, in which the whole world's going to be part of that. And that foundation has to be laid. And then when these 10 nations or 10 leaders, if America breaks up and there's 10 leaders, or if it's, maybe it's going to be, the British Common Market nations along with some other ones, maybe, America, Canada, New Zealand, UK, you go down the list. What you got? Australia. If you start looking at those nations, that could be it too. That could very well be part of that beast empire. The fact is, this beast empire is going to be very powerful. It's going to happen at this last day, and it says it only rules for 1 hour. We should be looking for some kind of transformation away from the sole superpower status of America to this new empire. And it could be a federation with America. I think America's going to be part of this beast empire. Probably will head up this beast empire, but there has to be a change in America. It has to be, because the political system in America is broken. Everybody knows it. Everybody sees it. And with this last election, people realize that even their votes don't count. Well, that's a perfect recipe for people saying this system's broken. I'm not in on it anymore. And when that happens, people lose confidence in their government, lose confidence in their ability to vote and other things. There's really no sense in having it. I think that's the foundation that's being laid. And there's some crazy things can happen, and probably will happen very soon. So as Christians, we need to be aware of that. We have to realize when these people are sitting there talking about we need to do this and that, you can find yourself fighting against what God's ultimate plan is. So remember that. Don't be so nationalistic. As Christians, I think that's always been something that bothered me. There's nothing wrong with loving freedom, love your nation, whatever, but realize that, God has plans. So, and we need to love Christians of all people, all stripes, all colors, all creeds, as it were. We need to realize that to love them, not necessarily agree on every point, but we need to love them and realize that there's people all around this planet of all nations we need to share the gospel with, not just, and love them as well. That's key points. But I just sit there and I look at it and I go, boy, I think that you're going to see, personally, I'm looking for, and I think we're seeing the foundation of that happening, that America's demise is happening economically, morally, geopolitically. I mean, we just see politically things are weird. People are no longer have confidence in the government. They're spending money like absolutely insane amounts. I mean, trillions and trillions, tens of trillions of dollars. We're well over 30 trillion. I mean, there's no coming back from it. I think the dollar days is done. it will fall apart. So people have been hoarding up all this money for themselves. If it's in dollars, do you any good anyway. You be effective, share your gospel, buy Bibles, buy stuff, buy tracts, help Christians around you. Put that money out there where you can help people, because I don't think it's going to be something you're going to store for yourself. I see the dollar demising very soon. I think it's going to, people are going to wake up just like in 1929, and suddenly, the stock market collapsed. I think you're going to see something like that maybe happen, and people are going to be just radically shaken. But that radical shaking is planned by the globalists, I believe, and I think that their goal is to establish this global order, and they're using COVID. I don't think I think they're allowing for COVID or using COVID to help usher that in. Now that they have it, let's use it. This event happened, let's use it. If they themselves didn't orchestrate it, they at least are using it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the hour's short, and if we see that COVID is transforming the world and the things that are happening, we should be able to see this federation take place, this 10-nation federation, or 10 groups, or 10 leaders, whatever it is. I personally think it's probably going to be 10 nations. Definitely in that direction right now. Probably, headed up by most likely America, UK, the British Common Market nations as well. And then maybe a few other nations will join that 10-nation confederation that will be truly global and have enormous power, influence. You're talking about Canada, America, maybe Mexico. Depends on what it is, but UK. It's going to be powerful. It's going to be, one that will, the whole world's going to be surprised by it. Who knows who else will be part of that? We don't know, but France, who knows? We don't know. but definitely some major nations will be a part of it, I think, and it'll be a new federation. And this new federation will have instantaneous superpower status. Think about it. If America's part of this group with you, think about the enormous power that you now have, that who could stand up to that, and I think that's to confront the Chinese fears that they've got, the Chinese threat, the dragon, and then the Russian threat. You could see a federation forming, especially with the demise of NATO or whatever. You can definitely see a 10-nation federation pop up really quickly, and then maybe it's in Europe, who knows? But the reality, I think America will be a part of it. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, we see, this, like I said, that national states are forming, and the instability in the markets are forming to allow for this rise of this economic system, to come in, which we would call the beast empire. We see the events happening in Israel that's laying the foundation for rebuilding of the temple. The nations to try to fix the problems of that burdensome stone, Jerusalem, going back to the prophet Zechariah. All the things that the Bible talks about that's going to be in place is happening. Do we see instability in the church? Absolutely. The Bible says that there'll be a great apostasy. We see that happening right now. This great apostasy, the foundation is there, laid for it to happen. You see people in the church, when you see 30, 40, 50, 60% polls that say that, there is no exclusivity of salvation in Jesus Christ alone, that, when you look at the moral aspect of it, not only the moral, but the theological aspects of it that are completely undermined, that's pretty important. When you start seeing that large of a number, 30, 40, 50% within the churches that are saying, invisible churches that are being polled, and they're saying that, there's more than one way to salvation, well, then you've denied the essentiality of Christianity, that Jesus Christ is exclusively the Savior of the world and the only way to salvation, the lone Savior, Messiah of the world. You're basically saying, well, all churches, all religions have a form of validity and truth to them, and oh, by the way, we can do away with this, this whole moral thing over here. We can just reestablish our own truth of morality, our own, and then, that as soon as you do that, you start rejecting other things. Well, you can reject, the establishment, of Christ and salvation, and just through Him alone, and so forth. These are things that happen once you start letting in a little. You've now got the avalanche of false heretical teachings, and just false teaching in general, and you've embraced what I think is what we'd expect to see, is a rise of this false global ecumenical type of religious system that's going to be in place, which ultimately will give their allegiance and power to the Antichrist and worship of him as God, as the God-man, the replacement of Jesus Christ, the false God-man who's going to come on the scene, which just so happens, is there something out there weird happening right now that's kind of laying that foundation? I think there is. They was talking about this mystery form, and he's going to come on the scene. And well, are we seeing this whole thing where the Pentagon's now releasing video after video every so often? It seems like now every few weeks. It seems like basically they've come across and said UFOs are real. They're a real thing. They just released another video out there where there's a spherical ship that's going along with an American ship at 36 knots in the video, and it suddenly goes into the ocean. And they say, "Hey, splash!" They're all, you can hear the sailors talking about this. Think about that for a little bit. The consequence is that basically, and the Pentagon has come right out and said, we acknowledge the existence of that. This is a basically anomaly, but it's one that is of intelligent origins. That it's being controlled intelligently. Well, that tells you right there, they're acknowledging that there is, they may believe it's an extraterrestrial, but could you imagine that being the lie, the deception? And Christians have talked about this many times. There's lots of books out there, lots of writers out there. I've talked about it previously, but could you see that that's something that can be used as a great delusion? Just like in 2 Thessalonians, it talks about that God would send a deluding influence. It is that he goes and deceives them. It just says that he basically allows for that deluding influence to take place. He allows, this deluding influence is going to take place so you will believe the lie because you've rejected the truth of salvation in Christ alone. You've rejected it, so now you're going to want to believe in this lie. And this lie is maybe that, like when he goes out and deceives the kings and when the demons go out, it says in Revelation 16, where it says the demons go out of Satan and the false prophet and Antichrist, and he goes out and deceives the king's world to bring them to the valley of judgment, where they're basically going to fight against the return of Christ. It's like, who would fight against God? You have no chance of winning that. It makes no sense. But if you've been deceived to believe that it's a foreign entity, power from another dimension or another planet or whatever, if you've been told that and it's an alien force that's coming here, you would raise your armies there. And it's not they're fighting against each other, it seems like. It's that they're there to fight against the wrath of the Lamb, the Lamb's wrath, which is kind of weird. And they're going to fight against this wrath of the Lamb, and that as he's come back, who's going to do that? Why would you position your armies to fight against God? Well, but if you're told that this is an alien force coming back, it makes sense that you would then be deceived into doing that, which tells me if that's the case, we should expect to see some kind of weirdness about aliens and about UFOs and about this kind of stuff. And that's exactly what's happening right now if you've been paying attention. There was Fox News has been coming out with that, just seems like periodically. Other people have been coming out with it, New York Post or New York Times, I think it is. But anyway, the point is that the Pentagon is the one coming out and releasing this stuff. And just so happens a time when all these other events are happening as well. You have the reestablishment of the Sanhedrin, the reestablishment of the Israel. You have the, all these events that are taking place. The movement to rebuild the temple. The aspects of apostasy seeping in a massive way into the church, just like it talks about in 2 Thessalonians. The things of Revelation are laid, in preparation. The events that we expect to see, and the instability of the countries, the instability of the markets, the weirdness in the environment that's happening. A lot of things are just seems to be pointing to, I think, some rapid changes or soon occurring changes that are going to happen. Like Christ said, when it happens, it's going to come like a flood. The end times is going to come like a flood. It's going to come very fast, and I think it's increasing dramatically. And I think the events are coming in very quickly. So as Christians, we should be aware of these things and sharing this with the people around us. And I think that as we see these development of national state alignments, for which I didn't even mention, national state alignments of Russia, Turkey, Persia, modern day Iran, Libya, so forth, coalescing in the mountains of Israel, exactly what we expect to see with the Gog-Magog war. I mean, there's things that are happening that's all pointing to the end times. So we have everything in place that we would expect to see. The only thing missing, ultimately, is, like I said, the 10-nation coalition is going to happen, but then you have to have a demise of the marketplaces and so on. So those are the things I'd be looking for in the near future. some kind of collapse of the stock market, economic collapse of the dollar, which is held up just by confidence. If when people no longer have confidence in it, and that's it, and that can happen very quickly, just like it happened in 1929. So be looking for that. I think that's the near one, and then with that will come these other markets, or it could be, strange enough, and I'm not trying to be too weird about it, but just it could be contact, where they basically say, when the government comes out and says we have alien contact, how would that affect the marketplaces? How would that affect government alignments when they feel like they need to do things or whatever? And that contact could be with some kind of, they claim an alien force, but we know that that's actually a demonic whatever, headed up by Satan and his fallen angels, as it were, that is actually orchestrating this event, and this grand deception. That could definitely be it as well. And they have their God man who may claim to have connection with them, and that he's part alien, part human, and that he's, the one who's establishing this, false Christ. Jesus is the real God man, the triunity of God, the second person of triune Godhead that comes down, fully God, fully man. This one is Satan's artificial one, a fake one, in his place. He was basically claiming that he's, got alien connections, or whatever, and he's part man too. So we expect to see maybe some leader that we are aware of, that we know, or whatever. Who knows? I still think Kushner may be that guy because of the alien, or because of the Abraham Accords, and because of all the other stuff that is associated with that. Because we know that ultimately there's going to be a peace agreement signed for 7 years, and that 7-year peace agreement comes on the scene. Daniel chapter 9 goes into that. The Antichrist is the one who's going to bring the 7-year peace agreement, and in the midst of it, he breaks it. Obviously, goes in the temple, which we see take place in Revelation 11, kills the 2 witnesses, and ultimately he has 3.5 years of hell on earth. And his sole sovereign power and authority becomes complete for that last 3.5 years. Well, then there has to be a peace agreement. There has to be a 7-year peace agreement, which just so happens there's a peace agreement going around right now called the Abraham Peace Accords, which is headed up by a guy named Justin Kushner, which is a Jewish guy. And you got to remember, he goes into the temple. Well, I don't think a rebuilt temple, the Jews are going to let a non-Jewish person go into that temple. But if you got some guy who's Jewish, or claims to be Jewish, and is also has some claim to some kind of foreign entity or power out there or whatever, then they would, because he's Jewish. And he would be allowed to go into the temple and declare himself, where he declares himself to be God. A Gentile's not going to be able to walk in there. A stranger, a non-Jewish person is not going to be able to go into the temple, a rebuilt temple. Just the reality. And that was always been in the back of my mind. I think, well, that would be interesting. Well, here's a guy who's doing a lot of those things. Not saying he's the Antichrist, but boy, right now he's at the top of my list, just so you know. Sorry, put that out there. But it says that he'll be revealed, when the time comes. So this contact thing that could happen, don't be shocked if you see Kushner's one of those guys sitting there, or one like him that's sitting there, and he's the guy. I think that may happen soon. So anyway, but first comes the 10-Nation Confederation, and I think the Gog-Magog war may happen first, which ultimately usher it in. I'm not sure. It may happen right after, but I think it's before the tribulation, but we'll see. Yeah, it's really amazing times that we live in. So I just figure I'll put that out there. All the events are happening. Keep your eye focused. Things are getting real interesting, real fast. So expect some kind of economic chaos to happen real soon. Rise of a 10-nation, just summary. Rise of a 10-nation coalition. So those are the key events I'd be looking for right now. And probably the Gog-Magog war to take place in Israel, which this thing that are happening right now may lead to that. Who knows? But I would definitely be looking for those 3 things to happen initially. And who knows after that, contact, acknowledgement of the Antichrist being revealed, and this 10-nation coalition forming very quickly then to confront this alien aspect or whatever it is. And, keep an eye on that too, the whole UFO thing with the Pentagon releasing a document supposed to come out, I think, next month. And, the things that are happening with that, just the timing of it tells me there's a lot of things there that as Christians we should be aware and tell other people and inform them, so that they don't buy the the great delusion, the great lie that Satan's going to use to deceive the world. And at the end of the day, they says they're going to worship the Antichrist, which tells me, yeah, there's something different about it. I mean, people don't go around worshiping men in this day and age, and they're not going to worship this Antichrist figure. They give their allegiance to him and all this other stuff. You know, it's just something has to dramatically change in the world. So be looking for that. Anyway, God bless. Stay safe. The Lord is coming back soon. We'll see you.